people to catch up if they're not already here. So here we are recording. First of all, thank you for coming. Welcome. And yeah, I'm delighted. So I did this about 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, because I had a group who said we'd really like to know more about what's in the open gift. So we did it. And then it just came up as an idea with me and Marcel, because this, along with some other things, are really the foundation of how we talk about emotions in Dignity Inc. So we thought, well, let's offer this to anybody who wants to come, and you can ask questions. You can be curious about where all this came from. You can challenge me on any of it that you want to. So we're just here for a conversation. So what I'm planning is for maybe 20, 25 minutes. I'm going to share some things that, from my perspective, have to do with creation of the book. And then it's questions, conversation, curiosity time. Okay? Everybody good with that? We're good? Okay. So, here we are. So we're talking about The Unopened Gift, and it's subtitled A Primer in Emotional Literacy. And that was intentional because, well, The Unopened Gift is a little bit inspecific. So we weren't sure if people would really understand what that was. And so we wanted to give them a clue, like, here's what we're talking about here. I'll explain more about that. But you see that it's by Lucy Nunez and me. And Lucy Nunez is my wife, and she was instrumental in helping write the book. She also translated it into Spanish, which is her native language. And so it's something we did together. And it was fun and challenging and frustrating and exciting and lots of emotions associated with it. It helped me enormously build my vocabulary of emotions in Spanish because we had to distinguish, for instance, between embarrassment and shame. And so, wow, we had to have a conversation about that. We had to distinguish between anger and resentment, which is not an easy thing to do in Spanish. So we've had that conversation many times. But anyway, so she's now retired, and she's not a lover of presenting, so she's happy to be happily retired, but she's still part of my life, and she's still part of this work. So a few things about this series. One, we're going to record it, like I said. So we're going to share it with other people. We're going to put it on YouTube. So just so you know that that's the context here. It's not it's not as intimate maybe as some of the other courses might be or conversations because it will be shared. Second thing, no transcription app. So if you got your otter on, turn your otter off. And please share your thoughts with the whole group rather than putting them in the chat. So some people love the chat. I never look at the chat, and I would much prefer that we keep the conversation among all of us so we can all share it. So if you would do that, I would appreciate it. So introductions. So let me talk just a second about who I am personally. So I grew up living overseas, a number of places. I'm American. I was born near Chicago. Um, I was born in 1955, so I'm a baby boomer. I had the pleasure, as I see it now, the gift of living in Africa and living in Switzerland when I was growing up. At the time, maybe I didn't see him quite that way, but I do now. And my background is I'm trained as a school teacher, as an educator, and then I worked about 20 years in business at in lots of different things. I was a truck driver, I was a janitor, I was a cabinet maker, I was an estimator, I was a project manager, I was a divisional manager, I was a CEO. So I worked at every level of an organization, mostly small organizations of 100 people or less. But then I stumbled across coaching, and I went to take a coaching course to become a better leader. And when I was there, I realized how ignorant I was about so many things in life. And it really got me on a different path. It got me on the path of discovering much more about myself and particularly about emotions and somatically what was going on with me. So I would say that it was enormously expanding, and it also, in some ways, turned my life upside down. But it led to me becoming a coach and working as a coach the last 25 years, mainly in the last 12 or 15, focused just on emotions, emotional literacy, emotional regulation, and emotion-centered coaching. So that's the professional piece. And I've been coach, writer, mentor, coach, trainer, um, everything in the territory of coaching and working with emotions and working with educators, leaders, people from all different backgrounds, people in technology, engineers, um, rocket scientists, really a whole range of people who had some interest in emotions or understanding how better to communicate or wanted to understand better about themselves, who they were, and how they could live their lives. So I would call it personal development or something in that territory. But a lot of it focused on emotions. And why emotions? Well, this goes back to the personal part because emotions for me were very difficult, and I lived some years that were uh, profoundly difficult and dark in my 30s and 40s. And the answer I found was not intellectual learning, it was emotional learning. It was building my emotional literacy, understanding them differently, that they all had a purpose and that they were logical, they had a structure, they could be learned, they could be navigated. So the whole idea that this energy that was so disorienting to me and seemed to be at odds often with what was happening in my head, that I could befriend it, that it could become a tool, could become useful to me. And that changed my life enormously. I would not be here today, certainly in this way, if that had not happened. So these two for me are intimately interwoven, is the personal and the professional. And these days, as you know, it's all about emotions, and a lot of it's about dignity, because dignity for me is the uber emotion. So why did we pick this name, The Unopened Gift? Well, mainly because when we started thinking about the book, when we started putting things together, we had a writing coach, and our writing coach, publishing coach, said, here's an assignment. Go out and find every book you can that's somewhat related to what you're going to write, and tell me what's so different about yours. Tell me what's unique about yours. So we did. We did our duty. We went out and found a lot of books and scanned them, and what we found was that books on emotions, and this was 10 years ago, largely were written from the emotion of resignation. They mainly said something like, well, emotions are a problem, but you can still live a good life in spite of them. That was the theme that we kept hearing. And we thought that's not right. We don't agree with that. We think they're a gift. And why we think that is everybody has them. Nobody knows where they came from. But a lot of us have not yet opened them. A lot of us have not yet investigated. A lot of us aren't aware what's there emotionally because we've never been shown that. And so the unopened gift for us was a logical title. It just made sense to us in terms of our thesis and what we believed about emotions. So I've had a lot of people say, love the name. I've had a lot of people say, I don't get the name. So, this happens when you name a book. Some people get it, some people don't get it, but that's where it came from for us. So the personal context for writing was I have a passion for emotions. right? They made a huge difference in my life. I talked about this that, I used to do what everybody does initially is run away from emotions or try to suppress them, try to run away from them, try to ignore them, try to rationalize them. I tried everything. And none of it really worked very well until I realized that maybe they weren't there to hurt me. Maybe they were there for a reason. Maybe there was some logic to having emotions. And that really helped me see them differently. Like, oh, okay, so if they're a tool and if I have them and if I can't avoid having them, maybe I should learn something about them. That would make sense. So that's really how I turn the corner. And I would say that's my unique experience. Lucy's is different. But for me, this was the solution to an ongoing challenge in my life for decades, for a very long time. And the learning was to pause and notice and listen to my emotions. And that learning to do those three things was so difficult. It was really challenging because I had the habit of running away from them, of ignoring them, of trying to make them go away. And so stopping long enough to feel them and notice them and then try to name them and try to figure out what were they trying to tell me and why were they showing up. That was without question the hardest learning that I've had in my life. So it's not always easy, but in my view, absolutely worthwhile. The professional context is the initial reason for writing the book was to put together lots of papers that I had written. I had written a lot of shorter pieces on emotions. And Lucy was very encouraging with this. She said, you should just put all these together in a book. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Well, I don't really know how to do that. So, okay, good idea, but I don't even know where to begin. And it really wasn't until I recognized my ignorance and acknowledged it that then it occurred to me that, well, maybe there was somebody who could help me. It turns out that one of my former coaching students worked in publishing and she helped people publish books. So I called her up and I said, hey, and she said, yeah, I'd love to help you. And that really helped me turn the corner. That was a huge shift because then I had somebody else leading me because I had no idea how to get from where I was to a book. I wasn't even sure it was possible. I guess I was a little bit skeptical about it, but I certainly didn't have much confidence in it. Lucy had much more confidence in me than I had in myself, or she had confidence in us. One of the things we wanted was just to have everything together so we could hand it to people. So when we had coaching clients, we could say, hey, here you go. You want to know anything about how we see emotions? Here it is. So it wasn't to make a big splash. It wasn't necessarily to make money. It wasn't, it was really about having a tool that would be helpful to other people and would support what else we were doing. And our thesis was this, that humans in every era and culture have done their best to develop a useful understanding of emotions, but today we need something else. We need a new interpretation that sees emotions as a practical tool. And that's what we were going for. So this book, one of the things our publishing coach asked us was, well, what kind of book? There's only like four kinds of books. I'm like, really? There's millions of books. How could there not only be four kinds of books? Well, there's a novel, and then there's a scholarly work, and then there's a personal history, and then oh, okay. So what we wrote was intentionally to be the author's perspective. And we say that throughout. This is the way we see it. You may not, that's fine. The whole idea of this book, if you read it, is so you get some ideas that maybe are useful to you. But you'll notice in the whole book, if you flip through, there's only about two footnotes. So it's clearly not a scholarly work, because I'm too lazy to footnote and I didn't know how to do it. And I thought, you know what? I just want to say what I believe about emotions. And that's really what it is. So if that doesn't align with, if that's not helpful for the reader, then that's fine, but it's probably not a very good book for the reader. So here's five things I learned about writing a book. Number one, there is a process. That for me was a huge surprise. I had no idea there's a process. And our writing coach would say, I can lay out the whole process. And I'd say, no, 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 no. Tell me the next step and tell me what I have to do and tell me when I have to do it. And she'd say, okay. And so we'd work on here's the next step and here's what you got to do. And here's, we agreed on a date by when. And for me, that was really helpful because hearing the whole process didn't quite make sense to me. It was too much for me to take in all at once. So that approach was very helpful for me. Let's just take one step at a time. When we get that step done, we'll go to the next step. And she was very good helping with that. Second thing is a book is never finished. You just have to declare it done for now. And this book now, I don't know, 8, 9 years published, I've already gone through and highlighted on the electronic version all the changes I'd like to make because I would like to update it. I would like to revise it, and I'm in the process of it. And one of the things I discovered was you can just keep rewriting, editing, changing, adding. There's no end to it. It's never finished. And even when it's published, it's not finished. You just reach the stopping point where you offer it to people. And it was challenging to acknowledge that, but it was also a big relief because then we could find a time where we say, okay, we're done. That's it. We're not gonna change anything else. We're just publishing it and that's it. And then later we'll revise it. And the way publishing is today, where you can upload a new version on Amazon and it's available to the next person who purchases, is so convenient for this. And that for me was also a relief. It took away a lot of the stress. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. You do the best you can, you offer it to people, and then you let go. I learned how much I still don't know, like a lot. And that was good. It was good to recognize, and it's good to continue to recognize, like this domain, it's almost infinite. We can never know everything about emotions. It's impossible. And that's okay. That's okay. It gives us a huge playground, a huge sandbox. And that was a very helpful thing to learn. I learned about the emotion of faith, right? I didn't have any evidence that anybody would buy it, but I still did it. Why? I just believed. I just believed, you know what? We do this, we put it out there. Maybe nobody will buy it, and that's okay, but it's still worth doing. I just believed it was worth doing. And that blind faith, you might say, was very helpful. And it's very helpful to also because when you write a book, you're taking everything you believe and you're putting it out in front of people. And you need faith that, well, people aren't going to attack you for it. Well, might they? Yeah, they might. But you know what? I have the faith that it's going to be good. It's going to be helpful. It's the right thing to do. So faith for me was very helpful to just continue on and put it out there. And the last thing is I learned to accept that once your book is launched, you have no idea where it's going to go. You don't know where it's going to go, who's going to touch it, what difference is it going to make, if it's going to make any difference. And that was also challenging to accept that. Like, I don't have any control over it, where it goes, how people use it, what people write about, say about it. I, nothing. I got nothing. And so it's helpful to accept that, just to let it go. It's like having a child, okay, they're just gone, they're out in the world. You send them off to college and, they text you once a week and that's all you know, right? And that's kind of what happens with the book. Like it's out there in the world and you have no idea when people are going to write to you and say, hey, I read your book and I loved it and I want to talk to you like Joe did, right? And that's why Joe's here, right? That's why other people are here. So again, it's exciting, but it's also a little terrifying at the same time because you just have no idea. There's no way to control it. So how to read the book? Well, there's four sections. So this book is about what. It's not about how. And this was a distinction we had to make early on because the what is the important piece. We wanted to start with what are emotions, and we wanted to get really clear on the interpretation that we had of emotions. Because when we started, because we did, but anytime we started to talk about how to work with them, the book exploded. I mean, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was too much. It's like nobody, it would have been 800 pages. Nobody would have ever bought it. So we decided we're going to work with just what are emotions. That's our fundamental question to answer and nothing else. So the first part lays out our interpretation. The second part reviews about 100 emotions in depth. The third part connects our vision of emotions with the world, like how do they show up in other aspects of the world beyond just us individually. And the last is the table, the dictionary like reference. It has about 250 emotions. So you don't have to read it front to back. It's like, okay, what part interests you? Some people just use the table. Some people it's however it serves you, but it does have distinct sections that were intentionally designed the way they're designed. So why now? Why did we write this now? Well, we had this sense that for hundreds of years, at least since Descartes, that we've been educating our children, ourselves, based on the idea that knowledge is access through reason. That's the way we learn. Real learning happens in your brain. That's what all of us learned in school. And 95% of our classes were intellectually based. And we kept saying, why? Why is that? Why aren't we ever shown the value of emotions? So what's happened is in our world, the way we see it, we've devalued emotions. But the emotions are a wonderful source of information and wisdom, but we don't see them that way. That's not our interpretation of them. And that's what we think would be beneficial if we could revise our interpretation of emotions, because then that opens the possibility of leveraging them, of seeing them as a tool, seeing them as a life skill, seeing them as part of everything we do or don't do, and how essential they are for ourselves, but also for our children, and that it's so evident they've been missing once we see the new interpretation. So we think that this hyper rationalism, that every solution has to be intellectual, has reached its limit. And it's still happening. When the U.S., I remember when Obama was in office and there was some report that said, oh, the U.S. is behind, I don't know, Singapore in math and science. What was the response? More money for math and science. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I get that. But what about emotions? Like nothing about emotions. And what we don't always see, and this is now coming out more and more in our work around dignity and education, is that, well, if you're emotionally dysregulated, you can't learn. So learning itself, intellectual learning itself, is contingent on emotional regulation. It's so evident when we look at it, and yet our whole entire traditional educational system is based on intellectual learning. We challenge that. So we see emotions as a full partner to reason in life. We see them like dance partners. We see that as big as the intellectual possibilities are for us, the emotional possibilities are as big. Right? They're as big, but we don't know that because we haven't looked at them. But we're just scratching the surface. So we see them as partners, not adversaries. And from my perspective, life is way better when we see them that way. Like, I'm not saying it's right, but I am saying it seems to be pretty effective for me, for us, and lots of people that we've worked with. So balancing the head and the heart. So here's two statements. One, nothing that humans engage in is solely a matter of reason or solely a matter of emotions. Everything we do is a blend of the two. And if we were going to be really ontological about it, we'd work the body in there and we'd say the three. But at least, this idea that we can do anything intellectually without the influence, the impact, the support of emotions is just not correct. I heard a comedian once, and here's what he said. He said, "It makes me suspicious that the idea that true knowing only happens in the brain comes from the brain." I like that. It's like, well, wait a minute. Where did this idea even come from? Oh, well, what would you expect your brain to say? That, oh, emotions are as important as we are? No, your brain doesn't say that. Your brain wants to take care of itself, wants to defend itself, wants to protect itself. So, what does the brain say? The brain says, oh, you know what? Emotions, they're secondary. They're not really that important. So this sums up, and this is in the front of the book. So, but this poem by Rumi that was written 900 years ago for us summed up the relationship we could have with emotions. That this being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. I can't think of a better relationship that we're going to have with emotions. I think this is absolutely spot on. So I love this, and it, for me, illustrates, articulates exactly how we could relate to emotions if we chose to. So here's your homework. We can come back to this, but I'll send it to you. Chapter two. But the closing is this. So I'm curious for you. One, do you have questions? Two, what was shared today, how does it change your understanding of emotions? Like, how do you see them differently? Or what are you getting a sense of, or in what you read? And how is it maybe changing you? So my part is complete. We have 28 minutes, and I want to hear from you. So what questions do you have about how we approached it, how we did it, why we did it? Anything about the book, anything about emotions, anything about our thesis, anything you're curious about, or insights. Maybe you have some insights.
Well, I'll give my insights and uh, this book, your beliefs and knowledge from emotions has not only made a huge impact on my life, my direction, even to the point where I'm now um, looking to, I don't want to say rebrand. I'm going back to almost who was I had I not been programmed and modeled by emotions are weak or emotions are, that you're just move through. And so this book has traveled, um, and I had made it once I realized exactly what you said. You can have the biggest life. You can have, you can you'll make decisions. Yet if the emotions aren't incorporated, understood, acknowledged, you can easily go back to the same place you were. Mm. Or the product or the situation is okay, it's done. And I'll just use an example that 2 weeks away from publishing a book that I wrote for 5 years. And of course, everything you said, Dan, about writing is so true. Um, maybe it could have been done 3 years ago, my little perfectionist and the way my brain was. So I literally journaled this morning. How's that perfectionist feeling this week? Because, that last. And so I sat and I just wrote some emotions down and I just sat with them and I'm like, and as just sat with them, not asking them anything. And I think that's where this book and this knowledge and this opportunity to create this uh, information about emotions is without them, there's no feeling beyond what you're doing. There's no in the heart reason. And so I just realized that, yeah, I'm always going to have this emotion of have to get it just right, or not emotion, but this mood. Yeah, with the emotions, I went, it said, why? Like, could we use another emotion? Like, what is it? Is it arrogance? Is it fear? And I just went through the list and eventually it was like they all just drifted away. Like maybe the fact that you could be in pride right now. You could just enjoy like what you've done is a big deal. And that is not anything I ever grew up with to know. So reading the book, being intentional on spending the last 5 years, and I'm still just able to navigate through 2025 pretty easily and go, oh no, that's not it. It is going to be a lifelong journey, and that I'm so grateful for.
I'm muted. Thank you, Sandy. Jolene.
I'm excited to be rereading the book again. I'm highlighting tons of things. I bought a second edition so that it's differently highlighted than the first one that I had. But I was wondering if you could expand on, because of your educational background in teaching, you said emotional dysregulation you cannot learn correctly. Did you pinpoint specific emotions for our youth, adults too, but our youth that would be very advantageous to master? Because I know if you don't have a grade 3 reading level, they've done a lot of research in Canada and they said you're 4 times less likely to graduate.
Hmm.
So, literacy. But with emotions, did you pinpoint which emotions are most important?
Well, this idea, I would say, is emerging, and part of it's emerging in the work that I'm doing with dignity. But I think it's pretty easy to see in a way. If you think about any of us, how well do we learn in the emotion of urgency? Well, you can only pay attention to a little tiny bit. Why? Because you feel urgent. In the emotion, I think in schools, you see the emotion of resignation. Like I've given up. There, given who I am, I can't. There's no possibility here for me. And, a lot of students have learned the emotion of resignation. I think a lot of students have learned the emotion of disdain. like to disdain learning, like it doesn't have value. It's not worth my time. So again, I think there's a lot of emotions that we could put there. But if we took the whole list of emotions and we just ran it through the filter of which emotions do we think support learning, which emotions do we think are barriers to learning, and which emotions maybe don't make much of a difference, I think we'd get a list of 60 or 70 emotions and we go, wow, that emotion, that at some level is a barrier to learning. Now, maybe it's more present in, middle school than in an organization where there are professionals, but I think that the range of emotions would be pretty consistent throughout because emotions do help us with different parts of life, with what to focus on, with what we care about, with how we interact, with how close we feel to things with that. So I don't have it in this book, and I don't have that written anywhere, but I think it's a great conversation. I think it will emerge in dignity and education, clearly, because that's fundamental. So I would just say it's not hard to believe that that's true from our own experience. And then we can just go through and start naming emotions. And I think it would be very easy to do with educators as well. What are the emotions that your students are experiencing that are barriers to their learning? What emotions support their learning? I think teachers know this. They may not have the vocabulary to express it clearly, but they know this because they're with students every day. So yeah, it's here's the thing I've discovered is you can take any question like that, any question, and you can ask the same questions about what emotions are barriers to this, what emotions support this. And they may be different for different people, but boy, there's a pattern to them. And again, it's great to identify what is it, for instance, people who don't save money. Oh, okay. What are the emotions that are barriers to saving money? What are the emotions that support saving money? Uh, we could do that exercise. Relationships. What are the emotions that support having a long-term relationship? What are the emotions that undermine having? Again, you could do that with any question that we encounter as human beings, and I think that's the beauty of having um, a sizable palette or vocabulary because then it's so easy to see, oh, yeah, this one would be helpful, this one not so helpful. Yeah, yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Great question. Joe.
That was a wonderful question, Jolene. Thank you for asking. So, I want to share my insight about this poem by Rumi. I have heard this poem in the original language Farsi because it's very close to the language that we speak. And I have read it in your book. I have read your book 3 times. So I've read it every time I read that poem because I like it. But I saw that poem in a different light when you were explaining it. And I am going to take that into my training session. So that poem of Rumi uh, did something to me that that disassociated me with the emotion because my body has become a home, right? And the emotions are guests that will come and go.
Mhm,
But guess what? In real life, what happens when emotions comes? If I'm angry, it makes me take an action rather than, in general, rather than making me pause and say, oh, it's anger. What is it telling me? So it has just, you know, it has made an emotion somebody, that entity that walks in, but it will go away.
mhm,
It is not there uh, to influence the way. It should not influence who I am or how I am
mhm,
going to act. And it brings that consciousness back that I'm constantly, I'm constantly in a place where I have to make choice. I like this guest, I'll treat this guest well, and then this guest will go away.
mhm.
So uh, I think today this poem made a bit of a difference. I'm going to make a slide in my training program on this. So
Yeah,
that's an insight. Thank you, Dan.
lovely. So I don't know how any of you are with guests, but when I have guests, I'm very kind to them and I treat them very well. I only complain about them when they're gone. So, and I do. And so I may feel the emotion of uh, annoyance when they're with me, but if I say anything, it's always in a could we do things differently way. But it is interesting. It is for me, it's quite similar to emotions. If I treat them like they're valuable, they're important, they're there to help me in some way, I can always complain about them later. I can always go, oh my God, I'm so tired of feeling frustrated. It's fine. It's fine. But I do think the presence with them is hugely helpful. We don't have to like them, just like we don't have to like our guests, right? Sometimes we have guests in our house that, I don't really like that person so much, but they're a guest. So I treat them as a guest. And then when they're gone, I can say anything I want to about them. And for me, that's so relevant with emotions because I think we can see emotions that same way as a guest. Yeah,
Absolutely.
lovely. Thank you, Joe. Lovely insight. And I wish now I feel envy. I'm feeling the emotion of envy. Dang it, because now I want to read it in Farsi and understand it, and I can't. So I'm envious, but that's okay. I'm glad you can. So, Elaine.
Yes. Well, I have underlined in my book this quote: understanding and even befriending emotions is one of the most powerful things we can learn as human beings. And I agree.
Great. And no questions. I just agree. Good. Sounds like you're in the emotion of certainty. Fantastic. Lovely. So, well, I want to invite, so I know some of us here are native English speakers, some not, but I want to invite anybody to share. And also, Ananya, I know we don't know each other very well, but still, you're invited. And Yasmin, you had your hand up.
Yes.
So, what,
Yeah,
what,
yeah.
what would you share?
So, yeah, so I am actually newbie. So I am new to the school of emotions and to this whole world of knowing emotions. But I did read the first few pages that you asked us to read. And the thing that I liked was that, sometimes when we are too close to something, it becomes the image is so blurred that it doesn't make any sense to us. And that's exactly how emotions are to me right now. So
Mhm,
probably they are just so close to me that I'm not able to read them clearly. But
mhm,
I'm sure as I progress in this journey, with you, with Jyotsna and all of you, I want to get to a stage wherein, I should be able to see emotions in second person. I
mhm,
should be able to read them outside. This is
mhm.
exactly how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And I'm just too grateful to be here, Dan,
Mhm.
to be associated with you and with Jyotsna, that I got this opportunity. And there's another thing, I've got two kids which are growing up, and I just feel fortunate that I'll be able to learn this myself. And I am definitely going to make my kids much more smarter emotionally than what I am right now. So that's my hidden
Well,
agenda.
I don't know if you'll be able to make them any smarter emotionally, but you can certainly create a space for their learning. But so one of the things that you're pointing to is something I've discovered as well, is there's a lot of people that I've worked with or who I've talked to who don't distinguish between emotions and them. So they have the idea that they are their emotions. And an analogy for me is, if you think about your thoughts, okay, here's how you think. We know that we can change our thinking. We can think differently about things. We can change our mind. So we know intellectually that we are not just our thoughts, right? Our thoughts are part of us, but they're really a tool. Now, some people may not see that, and they may not be very practiced at it, But even more people don't see the separation between emotions and them, their being, their soul, the core of them. And this is a big discovery for a lot of people when they go, "Oh, I'm not my emotions. I can have emotions without being the emotion." And some people have no idea that that's true. And so, of course, they go through life just reacting because why? They don't see anything different. They don't see the possibility that there's anything different. So one of the very helpful things that I think we can learn with emotions is to observe. So just like we would observe our thinking, like, oh, how am I thinking about that person? Well, I'm thinking that person looks pretty scary, right? I can think about how I'm thinking, but I can also ask myself about my emotions. Like, wow, isn't that interesting? Just like Sandy said, isn't that interesting? Like, I'm feeling this. Huh. Wonder why. Like, what emotions and why are they showing up right now? And what are they trying to tell me? And would another emotion be more helpful to me at this moment? And so once we start in that observation, investigation, that's when they become a tool. That's when we can have a little bit of separation from them. Now, what's interesting about emotions is we can just be in the emotion and we can feel the pleasure, we can feel the amazement. We don't have to analyze it, but then later we can. Then we can say, what was the emotion I was feeling when I saw the clouds that way? Curiosity, amazement, wonder. But in the moment, I'm just feeling it. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not naming it. I'm just having the experience of the emotion. So it's really quite interesting. We can either identify and name and work with the emotion, or we can just have the emotion. And both are okay. They're both okay. But to have both, wow, that's very helpful because now I can choose. Now I can say, what was it about those clouds that produced such a strong sense of wonder the other day? Eh, for me, wow, it's so useful to be able to go back and forth between these two ways of considering our emotions or experiencing our emotions. Yeah, so lovely what you're saying. Lovely. Sandy, you're on mute still.
Thank you. Something I've had on my diagram, and I realized I had highlighted it in your book. Something that's kept as a as being trained as a coach, right? It's always stay curious with the client. And
Mm.
something that I brought into that I highlighted is I also now say, as we work with emotions, I want you to also to be skeptical. And they
Mm.
just kind of, because skeptical or even using the word, it's almost like negative for them. And I
Mm.
could see if I was online, or I could hear if I was phone coaching, the shift in energy. And I would just, and so that has really helped me
Mhm.
stay with a client, or
Yeah.
even, right, learn if I stay curious and I
Yeah.
stay a little skeptical.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Lovely. Yeah. Lovely.
those two words really helped.
Super. Okay, there's a few people we haven't heard from. I want to make the space. Marcel, Tyson, Marie, am I saying it right? Ananya, Ananya. Am I saying your name correctly, Ananya? Okay. So I invite you.
Sir, thank you so much for this opportunity to be the part of today's session. I wanted to ask you a question about emotional regulation. That
Uh-huh.
how can we improve this quality of emotional regulation, and how can we understand the emotions of others in a proper manner?
Okay. Well, emotional regulation is probably a bigger conversation, but if you stay in this conversation with us, we will get to it. The question about how can we identify emotions in others, this was something I discovered was that when I understood my emotions and could name them, then suddenly everybody else made a lot more sense. Oh, that's why they're doing that. They feel resentment. But I didn't know that until I experienced it in me. So what I always encourage people to do is do your work first. Learn about your emotions, learn to name them, learn what they feel like, learn how they, what the impulse is, what you feel like doing in those emotions. And then everybody else will begin to make much more sense. So that's where I would begin. I would begin with yourself. I didn't know that would happen. It only happened by accident, or it happened as an outcome of me working on me. And then suddenly I'm like, oh, I get it. I get why those people are doing what they're doing. And then suddenly made a lot more sense. So we'll get to the emotional regulation, but that's what I would answer about the how do I how do I understand other people's emotions? The one other thing I would say is we never know for sure. Like we can't know what emotion someone's in because we can't see it. We can only see the way they behave and what they say. So we shouldn't ever be too sure that we have identified correctly, but it gets us close, and then we can ask, and then we can have a conversation. And usually then together we can get to, like you say, the proper emotion. Yeah, lovely.
Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
you're welcome. Tyson.
Okay, Michelle. I think since I started the course with you, not since, but in the middle, I realized that I wasn't paying attention on my emotions. I totally forgot to do my homework and things like that. And uh, and then we did a small coach with a colleague, and I was pretty sure that I need and I want to go deeper in this topic.
Mhm.
And when I start reading the book, and you share in the beginning that you were that person who didn't pay attention in your emotion, I feel so confident that I can.
Well, if Dan
Because
can
it's
do it,
so
I can
easy
do
for
it.
you about the emotion, so I'm confident with this. It
Yeah,
was a gift.
yeah, lovely. Well, I'll tell you something that sometimes people say, why emotions? Why do you write about emotions? Like, and I have to tell you that I don't know why, except that I think they're fascinating. But there's nothing that I'm aware of in me that's so exceptional that this is where I ended up. I think it's just been curiosity. I think it's just been putting things together, asking questions, and everybody comes to it in a different way. So I would say, you're on a lovely path and you'll get to wherever you get to, and that'll be a deepening understanding. And that's lovely. And I would say no two people do it the same way that I'm aware of, but everybody can find a way. So I think great. If me being able to do it gives you confidence that you can do it, that's a win. So I'm happy. So thank you, Tyson. All right.
Yes.
The two M's, Marcel Marie.
I can speak. I'm willing.
Okay.
This has been great. This has been a great discussion. I love the questions and I loved your introduction, uh, Dan. Thank you for just kind of carrying us forward on the motivations and pleasures and challenges that you faced in bringing this material out to the world. For me, my introduction to you, to emotion-centered coaching, to emotional awareness that at a level that I had never really experienced. And this book all came kind of at the same time, um, a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. And there are several things that are really valuable for me in this sort of the early chapter, the early part of the book. And one of them is that, and I think I can quote it. Um, The uniqueness of us as observers and therefore experiencers of life and its circumstances. And to quote it, you say, what we what we see when we look at the world will depend more on us than what we are looking at. And I guess the big gift of this for me is breaking the false dichotomy of emotionalism and rationalism, that they are not dichotomous, they're partnership, and that they're an essential partnership. And I've begun, because of this experience, to experience that in life and feel the partnership and feel the value of the partnership. And something else that you communicate that's really valuable for me is that an idea is only as valuable as its usefulness.
Mm.
And the idea of rational thinking, emotional living, um, the partnership between the two, it's the usefulness makes the argument for me,
Yeah.
that I have experienced the usefulness
Yeah.
in letting them partner and letting them do the dance together.
Yeah. Lovely. Good. Thank you. Yeah, me too. I always think,
Yeah,
well, a good idea is just a good idea. If you can't use it, if it doesn't help you in any way, then it's just a good idea. So,
yeah.
yeah, I love good ideas, but I like it when I can use them when they're connected with emotions and they're important to me. So, okay, Marcel, bring us home.
Well, first of all, I love being a participant. That's the best part of this whole thing. It's so great. What I did was I went back and I looked at everything and it said, I did anything that might help me avoid the pain. I worked too much. I drank too much. I watched too much television. I even avoided my emotions by reading obsessively. And so, what reminds me, very grateful to be part of this discussion, is that's not the Dan I know today. That's not the Dan I get to work with today. That's amazing to me, to see that written. And then you see the human who's sitting here saying, well, you know, if you think of it this way. So having someone teach through their wounds, very, very big for me.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, it's just a reminder to me that emotional regulation is an antidote to all those things. Look at this. It says it right here. I was in a dark and confusing time. Well, emotional regulation can bring that to more light and more certain in time. I quit running. Okay, what causes people to run? Well, the emotional regulation can actually allow you to, what we've been talking about, think about what we think about. And in the neuroscience world, that's called metacognition. Great. Let's think about what we think about. So, love being a participant, love working with the team, and it's 11 o'clock Central Texas time. So, I'm sure you'll be wrapping us up.
It's time for us to go. But the next chapter, that's the reading. It's in the presentation, but I invite you to read and bring your questions, and we'll do the same thing next week, and we'll just keep doing this for 5 more weeks until we're through with the unopened gift. All right. Thank you all for being here. It's a
Bye,
delight. I
y'all.
love having this conversation. Have a wonderful evening,
Go
night,
Toronto.
morning.